Good morning, USA, and good evening, Philippines. Good afternoon, the UK. This is Phenjie Villacin. You're listening to the Roof Chamber Live, and joining me for today's broadcast is our very good friend from Cebu, Pons Alvarez. Hey, Pons.
Great to see you again, Fenj. And tonight's gonna be a really interesting night because
Yeah,
we've got two friends from both ends of the spectrum
right.
that are going to be participating. So let's go straight to them.
Yeah, we're gonna be talking about mental issues again. We've talked about that a couple of episodes before, but we're
Yeah.
gonna discuss about this in a different light. How we're able to how people suffering from mental issues are able to cope with their struggles during the pandemic.
You know, I've
Or
had
during,
me-
go
yeah,
ahead.
I've had mental issues ever since.
And so do I.
But I never quite got to resolving them. But anyway, I survived.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if our friend Ed is already on on the stream. I don't think so. I don't think so. So I think
Let's get.
he's having trouble with his connections right now. So anyway, let's just go straight to the point. We are going to be talking about, or the title of today's topic is "Breaking Sad," sort of like a play of words based on the TV series Breaking Bad. But this is Breaking Sad, meaning defeating stress, anxiety, and depression during the time of the pandemic. So it's yeah, it's going to be an interesting discussion. All right.
Yep.
So without further ado, we'd like to introduce today's guest from Metro. I'm assuming Metro Manila, correct? Are you familiar if he's somewhere around Metro Manila, Pons?
Yeah, he is. He is.
Okay, yes.
And yeah.
So we would like to first introduce our first guest. He is a psychotherapist, a Christian psychotherapist, and he is going to be able to share with us some insights regarding how we are going to be like people who are suffering from mental issues are able to cope with whatever they're struggling with, especially during the time of the lockdowns. Uh, Friends, please make welcome Phil Lajarca.
Hi,
Hello.
Coach Phil.
Yes, hello.
Coach
Good
Phil.
morning. Hi.
Hi, Phil. How are
Wow.
you?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm fine right here in Manila. It's about 9 p.m. right there is it in Dallas?
It's
About,
8 p.m. I we made a huge we committed a huge error when we created a blurb because I was thinking, I was thinking that we I forgot to remember that we switched back to daylight savings time, which is
oh,
spring
yes.
forward in the United States. So I wrote down the same schedule, which is what used to be 10 p.m. and
Mm-hmm.
I failed to adjust the time. So it's 8 a.m. in the United States Central Time, to be specific, here in Dallas, Texas,
Oh,
which is 9 p.m. in the Philippines. So it's you we bumped the schedule an hour earlier because of the time change here in the United States. So all
yeah. Well,
right.
that's very interesting.
So Ed is here. Ed, I'd like to introduce another member of the crew who had some issues with the connections. Ed, are you ready?
Yeah.
Oh, there
Hi.
you go.
Let's hear them. Let's hear them.
All right. So
I,
I like your cap, bro.
yeah. I like my cap too.
All right. So, anyways, we're going to before that. How's it going, Ed?
Good. Good. It's been a busy day. Glad to take a break.
All
And
right.
Yeah.
night.
With a busy day for all of us yata.
Pretty much, yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
All right. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our next guest. He will be talking along the from a place where he actually experienced depression and anxiety. And so he will be talking or coming from the patient side of the spectrum, so to speak, while Phil will be coming from the coach side of the spectrum.
Yeah.
The psychological coach coming from that place at least. So, friends, without further ado, we'd like to welcome for the very first time as well to the Roof Chamber Live, Philip Roa.
Hey
There you go.
everyone, good
Hi.
evening.
Oh, Philip.
Hi, Philip. Philip, so we have two Philips. Actually, we have two Phils, Coach Phil and Philip. Anyways, so how are you doing, Philip?
I'm really good. I'm excited to be here. I'm looking forward to our discussion tonight.
Nice. And I don't think you were able to meet Ed prior to the live stream. So this is my nephew Ed on your
Hi.
I want to say right side.
Yeah, that's right. He's on my right. Hi, Ed.
Hello, Phil.
Nice to meet you, man.
All right. He will be one of the hosts for tonight, as he's a regular host anyway. So, all right. So we're gonna talk about the mental challenges during the lockdown. Breaking sad. Phil, Coach Phil, first of all, tell us a little bit about your background. Tell us about your practice as a psychotherapist. How is it different from being a psychologist or a psychiatrist?
Oh, okay. Well, the psychotherapist is the name, or is what you call the work. So the function and the work is a psychotherapist. So a psychologist can be a psychotherapist. A psychiatrist can do that, and a guidance counselor can also do psychotherapy.
Right.
And some life coaches, probably in the United States, they're also authorized to do psychotherapy. So the work is basically called psychotherapy. A psychiatrist would be someone who will recommend or dispense drug medications, get to the biology of it. A psychologist will go and concentrate more on the mental, the mind, and so he's got many different techniques regarding mind processes.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, in my case, I am a guidance counselor and I do psychotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
I do that in our facility here in the Philippines. There's one in Quezon City, which is I deal with drug addictions, different types of mental difficulties and mental disorders like schizophrenia, mood disorders, etc., and all those stuff. And I also have a clinic where also in the same vicinity but a different building.
Mm-hmm.
So I do have my clinic at the Christian Medical Specialists.
Right.
Here. If you're familiar with West Avenue, or if you're familiar with
West Avenue. Yeah.
yeah, that's the place. That's the location. CMS, I think, is has been popular for quite some time, or more than a decade or two. Yeah.
Wow.
That's what I do.
Yeah.
And yeah, I also do some mediating in court.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah,
Really?
I reconcile people who already have wasted their lives. Putting up a fight in a legal fight. So that's what I do also. So,
Wow.
and yeah.
So in other words, you try to mediate so that it doesn't, escalate. The tension between the two parties won't escalate and drag on.
Technically, it's already an escalated thing.
Oh, okay.
They
So
brought it to court. Everything's
yeah.
already in court, and it's already in the
Right.
next process of litigation. So,
Right.
but the judge will say, before we do a court thing, and since if it's possible for you to be reconciled or have a compromise,
Right.
I'll bring you first to this mediator, and that's what they do.
Right.
So,
Okay. So anyways,
conflicts.
I'd like to ask you, Coach Phil, something.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, apart from the fact that I like it that you're in West Avenue because that's near. I hope it's still the same. It's one of my favorite outlets because Kowloon House has this fantastic shop.
Oh.
Shop on Cokes.
Mhm.
Yeah. But at any rate,
And lumpia.
oh yeah.
Yes.
Fresh lumpia.
But what I'd
Bola
like to
bola.
ask you is how did you get into this discipline? Because it's rare that you actually,
Oh yeah.
uh, you're it's a specialized skill that you're doing right now. Right now, how did you
Uh,
arrive at that?
I never really intended to be in this situation right now because although I started my undergrad studies with psychology, I was planning on going to medicine. So,
Mm,
but I wasn't able to continue my med studies.
okay.
I got into different corporations, went to entrepreneurial jobs, had a lot of different uh, fly-by, not fly-by-night, but fly-by careers, yeah, whatever was in demand. But I came to that point in my life where I said, what am I going to do? Most people will be doing IT, doing nursing, whatever was in
Right.
demand. And I told myself, I want to help people and I want to be able to help them at the best that I could. I wanted to be a doctor, but I never got there. So I
Right.
said, the next best thing, maybe should I be a paramedic or what? And I ended up
There
counseling.
you go.
Yeah, when I look back at my life, I said, yeah, counseling is a very, very appropriate thing to do because in my experience, many people have been talking to me about their personal problems. It's been happening since I was college. So I said,
Oh,
let's go pursue it. And that's what I did. I took it up in the Alliance Graduate School, but here in the Philippines. As I continued, I pursued more studies, took up guidance counseling in a different secular school. I passed the boards, and then now that's the
wow.
career I'm heading on to. And later on, there were opportunities for people looking for someone to reconcile fighting uh, fighting from among conflicts in
Amen.
families. So somebody recommended me, why don't you go on training, get a training with the Philippine Mediation Center, and then let's see where it takes you. So that's what I did. So once in a while, I get called in court so that we can reconcile things. Basically, that's it.
Amazing. Amazing. Okay. I'd like to ask uh, Philip and Phil. It's been a year since the lockdowns,
Yeah.
right? It's been a year since the time that the whole world shut down because of an unknown enemy, pretty much a virus that came out of nowhere. It was pretty much like a curveball. It came from off of left field,
Sheer
and
disruption.
yeah, sheer disruption, and everyone didn't seem to know how to deal with it. So pretty much every major cities around the world shut down, and this caused a lot of problems for people,
Mhm.
especially those who have been suffering from mental issues. The manner by which they would cope with this new situation was very difficult for a lot of people. There were reports of suicide, were reports of depression, and so on and so forth. In the States, for example, we've heard of people raping other like relatives, for example, who've been cooped up inside the same home.
Mm.
So my first question is, I guess I'd like to direct my first question to Philip. Philip, when you first heard about the lockdown, when it was announced that Manila was going to go on a lockdown, a full lockdown, did that cause any stressful episodes for you?
At first, it wasn't stress. It was really more anxiety because I had worked from home before,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't know. But that was when I was writing my co-authoring a book, so I was just focusing on that thing. So I knew to myself, oh, okay, I can do this. I can work for so long, X number of hours
Mm-hmm.
because it's just one thing. But with a company that I'm working for and I'm handling a lot of other tasks, I was a bit anxious and nervous because I didn't know if I could pull it off,
Mm-hmm.
especially because I know the house is my comfort zone. I was thinking, oh my gosh, I might have to, I might end up slacking off. I might end up sleeping in more. I don't think I'll get any work done. So that was my number one concern.
Mm-hmm.
But after just 1 week of experiencing the lockdown, I was surprised because I actually enjoyed and preferred working from home.
From home, yeah.
Yeah, because well, aside from being efficient, you wake up and you don't have to drive to work. You don't have to prepare your food. You just wake up, brush your teeth, and you can go straight to work and get a lot more done. But that's when the stress started piling
Right,
up
right.
because we were also adjusting with the travel bans, and it affected our suppliers, our relationships with retailers because we couldn't get our product to them at at the committed days.
Mm.
And so we were scrambling to enact business continuity protocols. And I was in the thick of that. And that was such an experience because I can say, wow, I was in a pandemic and I had to help the departments um, continue everyday tasks. But when that happened, and I had no idea how to deal with something like this, that's when I started being stressed out, and that's when my anxiety actually
Mm.
turned into anxiety attacks, where I had trouble sleeping, I had trouble functioning, I had trouble working, and take note, I was already being medicated and treated
Wow.
through therapy for ADHD, but this was totally new. And so when I told my psychiatrist this, she actually prescribed me new medication because apparently, and I researched this, it's a real thing, I was going through adjustment anxiety disorder because
Mm.
I had gotten so used to the routine of going to work and having a set time to do work, to go home and live my life. Now it was just blending together, and my mind was just saying, "You have no context for this. You don't know what to do." And it was showing
Mm.
in my emotions. It was showing in my body. My GERD, my stress triggered GERD was again
Mm.
activated, and it wasn't up until I think 6 months in that things started to normalize in my body. Aside from the medication, I also finally understood. Hey, this has happened. This happens every 100 years. A pandemic seizes the world, and so it was only then where I got to simmer down, accept it, and uh, by the grace of God, after about a year of being under the new meds, my therapist gave me the go ahead 2 weeks ago. Okay, you can start. We can start weaning you off the new medication I gave you because you have already adjusted. But it was tough. I mean, even for someone like me who is medicated, and then was seeing a therapist, it can still be difficult because, especially at least for my generation, the millennials and maybe the Gen Zers
Mm.
or Generation Alpha, they've never gone through this.
Mhm.
Generations before me may have. I mean, I'm not calling you guys old, but I mean, you have experience with that sort of thing. Us were like, what? The whole world just shuts down, and so it was tough for me too. It really did affect me mentally, simply because, and I might speak for my generation of the younger ones, probably just because we have never gone through something like this before, where everything that we used to do normally has become a new normal, and you're just stuck at
Mm.
home.
Mm.
For some like me, I enjoy it. As a writer, I need my space to think. But
Mhm.
I know some office mates, and I know some friends who really have struggled with cabin fever,
Mhm.
and it shows in the way that they share. Oh my gosh, I mean, sure, 1 month, yay, you're not going to the office, and then by 3 months, it's like, oh my gosh, are we gonna be stuck here for the rest of the it,
Yeah,
it, it really was a challenge for everyone.
yeah.
Well,
Ed, you were gonna say something. Sorry, Ed, you were
yeah.
gonna say something.
No, I was just going to when Philip was saying some of us might have experienced it. I was just gonna crack a joke and point at you guys. but 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 really quick, Philip, what's your background? What's your day job?
Oh, I'm the marketing content writer for a company called Sanitary Care Products Asia. We're a tissue paper converter. So from the raw materials that we get, we transform them, or we convert them, not transform.
Got it.
Your company must have really raked in, the dough during the pandemic, because toilet
So
papers were or tissue papers were pretty much in
we,
demand.
we were really we were really blessed in the sense that we are rather an essential.
Ah,
And
true.
actually, when as the ECQ wore on, we eventually did get IATF approval to resume work because we were considered an essential good. So that in itself was also such a blessing. And because SCPA's heart is to also help the Filipino people. So even to us, I mean, even as early as the Taal eruption,
Right.
our gosh, our first ever meeting with our president, our president goes, we've gone through something like this. We've gone through something worse. The eruption of Mayon back in 1990. Am I correct? Was it Mayon? Or sorry, Pinatubo
You
in
know,
1991.
Yeah.
When I was just newly born then. And our president goes, the Pinatubo eruption was a lot worse. Our mission is to serve the Filipino people, and as long as we can, we will report to the office. So we were ready. We were ready even then. Okay,
Wow.
until like something really bad happens, we still work. And even when the pandemic hit, we were all like, okay, then we just get ready to work from home. We were ready to close the office and have everyone and have all the staff just bring home what you need, and then let's work from there. And so we were just ready for that.
Wow. All right. So we're gonna talk some more after the break. We're gonna we're gonna explore this subject further, stress, for example, and anxiety. But we're gonna pause for a break, and after the break, we're gonna continue on with our discussion. All right.
Hello to everyone from Roof Chamber Radio. I'm encouraging all of you to stay here, stay in this chamber. If you want to be inspired, you want to be encouraged, this is where it's at. And we're all going to need this, especially, in this new year that we're in. We don't know what's up for tomorrow. We don't know what's going to happen next week or next month. But I believe that when you gather with people who believe in the power, the faithfulness, and the goodness of the Lord Jesus Christ, there is power in that in itself. So stay here. Stay in the Roof Chamber Radio. Be inspired, be encouraged. And let's all go through life, not on our own, and more than just with each other, but let's speak the faith, let's share the faith, let's live by faith, and let's walk by faith. God bless you all, everyone from Roof Chamber Radio.
Okay, guys. Well, those of you viewing now, if you wish to make your comments, please do so we can read your comments and take part in this discussion. So just comment on the Facebook page and the YouTube channel, and we'll be glad to read out whatever you posted. Coach Phil, I'd like to ask you.
yes.
We're going to deal with the first issue that comes to mind when it comes to these mental difficulties. The first one is stress. How would you define that?
Oh, stress would be something that's an overwhelming amount of thoughts based on the tasks that are coming up to you, or things that will produce a reaction of from an overwhelming experience. So that's going to be stress. For example, well, we all know that we have certain limits for our capacities. So when we have to do something at a shorter period of time, or we have to do tasks more than what than we can process, that's going to develop into stress. So stress is technically something that's overworking or overthinking, and it could be over exerting effort on something. So that causes stress. A lot of people are feeling that right now. Yeah,
Yeah.
Philip.
Is
Yeah,
is is stress also possibly because of the fact that people have the inability to control things, or just are just, there's just too many uncertainties that they can't be able to predict.
Yeah, that's right. It's also when you are crippled or when you feel like you're helpless, you're not really incapable. That just so happened that you are being made helpless. Like for example, restricting you inside the house. It's like being
Mm.
in prison. You have so many ideas in mind, you have so many ambitions, you've got so many work and tasks that you'd like to accomplish, but you can actually do them. It just so happened that you're being restricted to do it. So that's stressful. Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to bring up something that I read way, way, way back
Mhm.
by this by one of the foremost radio personalities that dealt with these issues. His name's Earl Nightingale, who actually pointed out that some stress is actually good because, like for instance, in the case of corals, they thrive when they're the waves are lashing strongly against them.
Mhm.
So the coral polyps actually thrive in that kind of an environment. But nowadays, we also refer to stress all the
Mhm.
time as something wrong. Is that right?
Well, in a sense, it's right, but let me talk to you about eustress, and which is what we call the normal stress. Okay, put yourself in this situation. You're shopping. You went to the mall. You bought lots of clothes, a lot of shoes, a lot of things. Yeah, after shopping, you felt like your legs are cramping because you've been walking for like 3, 4 hours all around the mall. It's a stressful thing, but in the end, you're really happy doing it. That's
Okay.
useful. Okay. So you kind of can't walk normally anymore, but you're happy because you were able to buy the things you wanted. So it's stressful and it's also useless. Okay. Another way, a fireman. A fireman will go inside a burning house. That's a stressful, but he does it anyway because he likes doing his job. He's very fulfilled at saving people,
Mm-hmm.
protecting lives. It's stressful, but after having done it, it's called eustress. You like it. You are fulfilled. Same way with mothers who bear children, and doing childbirth is really stressful, and they get fulfilled. That's a normal kind of stress. There's the kind of stress that you look at as something very devastating, and that is a very unhealthy stress. The stress, like for this one, for the pandemic, that tells you you can't work anymore, or you won't be able to gain the money that you need, and you start overthinking and thinking about the future, the negative future. That is a very negative stress. So we have a lot of that. Your car breaks down in the middle of the night and it's getting cold, snow's coming in. That's a very it comes with fear. That's also a terrible time to be stressed. And I don't know, but sometimes if you see your wife, you might be feeling stressed, or you see your husband, you feel stressed. Uh, Hopefully, it's not that case. Okay, once in a while, when the bills come, you can't pay them.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a negative stress,
right.
and there are ways to manage it.
Well,
Uh,
when the wife is stressed, the husband is also stressed.
True that.
Tenfold, tenfold.
Oh,
But I tell you what, I wouldn't want to be the guy who gets stuck in the middle of the night, very cold, and it's snowing and it's icy. That's the worst case scenario, man.
You just went through that.
I wouldn't. Yeah, it's just I don't want people to go through that. Anyways, going back to the discussion, what about so does an anxiety is that a result of stress, Coach Phil?
yes, yes, it
All
is
right.
possible to result. One of the reasons why you become anxious, stress is one. That's why what we recommend for people who are having anxiety, first step is to see to it that you're fit, your body is fit, you've eaten well, you've slept well, and you're not doing a lot of overwork, because that's the basic. You can't feel comfortable, you can't even imagine about solving problems when you're hungry.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't do that when you're feeling weak or sick, or when you feel you have a fever and you've got many things to do. That's going to be causing some anxiety on your part, because that will produce a lack of strength, a sense of helplessness when it goes to the extreme. So, yes, the stress can go and lead to anxiety. So, that's just one of the reasons for having anxiety. Another reason for getting anxiety is fear, which is a very common thing. When you're afraid of something, something that you don't want to face, probably you can work it out, but you just don't like, or you're trying to avoid, that causes anxiety. Okay. And many times we see this in people who have been abused, who can actually, they can be empowered to report this to the authorities, or they can be empowered to manage it and deal and negotiate, or even talk reasonably. But it's just that they're so afraid to do it, and it causes anxiety, fear. Now, guilt is also another source of anxiety. Like when you've been keeping something that you did way back when you were young, or for quite some time now, nobody has known that you did something really wrong, and it caused something, a very serious consequence to someone else, or maybe to yourself, and you feel that guilt. Sometimes when it is so devastating, when many consequences come about from that action. Like, for example, you probably have some self blame coming in, and you say, "Oh, if only I didn't go into that driveway. If only I didn't go with this guy. If only I wasn't there during this time. If only I said yes to this." Those kind of thing. And then that guilt can also cause some anxiety. Yeah, and I hope we'll be able, and I'm pretty sure we'll be able to talk about that and solving those things.
Okay,
Go ahead.
Venge, I just want one question. This is really something that I'd like, I'd like an answer to. Coach
Sure.
Phil, if you don't mind, would you attribute this kwentong yaya, all right, to
Can you translate
causing?
kwentong yaya in English
Well, okay,
for the benefit of our
yeah,
American viewers?
all right. The stories that your
Nanny
Nannies,
stories.
nannies
nanny
told you.
stories, nanny
All right,
stories.
the
Yeah.
nanny stories that the frightening ones that co-
Oh,
that that continue to that manifest themselves much later on in life, because that really frustrates me, because I do come across people who are so fearful, really fearful, and I do know of their background, and they tell me of their nannies telling them these horror stories
Are we
about
talking about vampires, the aswangs, for example?
whatever. There's they have all of these, they have all of these stories that they couldn't sleep
Right.
anymore at night, and they'd be in the
Basically,
dark, and
pananakot,
they
right?
I'm sorry.
yeah.
I'm sorry. What was that, Philip? What was that?
Basically, pananakot.
Oh yeah,
They
yeah,
just scare you.
yeah. It's
They scare
scary.
you.
Yeah.
Scare you.
Hmm.
it's
So I always, because I try to tell them that, from my worldview, we don't have the spirit of fear, you know. So that's the reason why that we try as much as possible not to be fearful. But
mm,
it still keeps coming back, and I said, boy, if I meet these yayas, I am really going to belt them.
yeah, yeah.
So I just want to find out, is does that have bearing on these fears that that prevail in this, after so many years?
Yes, well, let me tell you about that. Well, there are some details on it. Here in the Philippines, many people still are superstitious, and
All right.
there are plenty of ways to really instill fear in children. Like,
Uh-huh.
let's go there. There's this tikbalang right there. Or if you're not familiar with tikbalang, it's a
Like
big
Half
half
horse.
horse,
horse, half
half
man.
human.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
half human, half,
And
but it's more like with the head of a horse.
Right.
yeah.
It's a mythical creature.
Yeah.
Things like
Smokes
that.
a
And there are many other
cigar.
mythical things that you come up with just to control your children. Even, yeah.
I think in
And,
English it's centurion, probably.
oh no, it's
No,
not.
no, no, no,
It's
not that.
far
No,
from a
that's Centurion.
centurion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, a tikbalang, it's like a human form, only with the
Right.
head of a horse.
Right.
Yeah, a centurion will have the body of a horse and with the torso and arms of a human being, with the head of human being. Anyway, things like that that will cause fear, probably for control or for some reason, a community would share that kind of story for community beliefs and social control system in a community. Like in one
Social
community,
control system.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a social control system. In the province, in Laguna, there's a location there where everybody must be able, when they come home, they must be able to wipe their feet before coming in, because if not, something bad will happen in the community.
Oh,
And
I
there are
heard
many,
those things.
yeah, things like that. Or when somebody dies, you should break a glass of water or a pitcher of water right in front of the house. Otherwise, somebody will die again, and a member of that family will die, something like that. And these things could instill fear, even so in children. But normally, we overcome those fears because as we grow up, the experience start proving otherwise, or the things that we do as we grow up, we don't see evidence about it. The only people who would remember it is when there are reminders to continue it. So a community would continue that belief, and you sort of keep it until you reach old age. Well, some
Yes.
get to remove that at about 40 or sometime 30 or 40, because it doesn't seem to be significant anymore, especially when people from the province move to the city. Most of the beliefs are watered down or just they
Mm,
diminish,
mm.
that kind of thing. The community has a say or has a contribution on if you instill that fear. So children, yes, it's true. I've had counselees like children, when people who were being threatened, who were raised up in fear back when they were a child, they had problems like that. And most of the time, it's when they were not able to overcome those fears from childhood. Probably it has run through the family and this person has not explored. And it's very common that those people at old age who experienced this back when they were young, they don't connect a lot with a lot of people. So they don't get to open up to different kinds of perspectives. So, like in the Philippines, we're not afraid of Banshee. You know, Banshee, it's a European myth.
Mm, mm.
Now there are people thinking about Banshee. Now, not because they see it on, they went there and they, no, they see it in movies, they see it
Right.
in games, and all that stuff. Yeah. Zombies were not a thing of the Filipinos.
Yeah,
Filipinos
exactly.
would be more like vampires, not the European vampire, but the aswang,
Mm.
Mm.
that mythical creature which is flies with wings of a bat and is
With
got.
a half of a half of a human body with
Yeah.
wings, right?
And the other half, which is from the torso down, is somewhere else
Right.
where you can put garlic and salt on it,
Right.
like that. We had that fear about that, but zombies was not a thing until globalization came in. So you see, you get to learn it. Children get to learn the fear from that.
The problem is you mentioned that parents or nannies would share stories about that to
Yeah.
control their children. The problem is the children get traumatized by these stories growing up, right?
Yes, it is very possible, especially when you're.
When they turn 55, they're still having the
They're
feeling the
still
same way.
traumatized by the story.
you
Yeah.
know, there are things that to make that possible. Okay, keep threatening a child. Let him avoid. You have to prevent him from playing, and then restrict him from socializing.
Right.
That will really cause a lot of damage.
Right.
Yeah, that will
Wow.
really cause a lot of damage.
Wow. Um, I guess my question is, with regards to the lockdowns a year ago. Philip mentioned something about him going through anxiety because of the deadlines, right? The deadlines that he was expected to submit and all that, but because there was just very transportation was difficult, communication was very limited, and so on and so forth. Things changed. The new normal began. Um, can anxiety be a result of a change of environment, a change of situations, for example? Uh, can that cause a problem for an individual suffering from anxiety? Uh,
Definitely,
yeah,
definitely.
yeah,
So when that happened, it wasn't really because of my normal tasks that I had to
right.
do. Because I was just business as usual. But the new thing that happened was I was part of the business continuity plan team. And one of the first things we had to do, which was a first for in the company's history, was to write business continuity plans for all departments. And so there was a team head who was my workmate in my department, and she basically said, We need to write this because all the departments need help writing it down." So we would get outlines, and we would, transcribe. We would basically write and transcribe it. And take note, this was 12 departments, I think, and this was the first time any of us were doing this. So it really was a mad scramble to get organized because we had to be prepared. Of course, we couldn't shut down business because the employees would be affected, and not only that, our customers would be affected because they wouldn't have hygiene products, and that was very, very valuable. And basically, they were necessities. And so the reason, at least for me, for my anxiety, was because, as I mentioned earlier, I had never gone through this scenario before. I didn't know what to expect. And it was that uncertainty that
Mm,
caused the anxiety because the looming question in my head was, what's next? What am I going to do? It wasn't like, okay, I it wasn't like going through a fever because I've gone through a fever before. I know what to expect. So if I get a fever, I take paracetamol, I hydrate. I know what to do. I know what to do to get through that. But in this case, this was a unique experience for me, and so I had no idea what the next step was, and that's how my anxiety got triggered. Because, and I think Coach Phil can back me up on this, your emotions come from your mind.
mm,
How you feel comes from here.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you don't know what to do, the default of it's either fight or flight. And
Mm-hmm.
there are times your body just defaults to flight. And that can also lead to anxiety because you're not facing it forward. You're not going through it with a plan. You're basically freaking out. And that's what happened to me. And I think I can also speak on relatively that was the same mindset for a lot of people, if not most people, who went through this because they had no idea what to do. And that's where the anxiety kicks in because you're trying to figure out what's next. But because you've never had experience,
mm.
your mind just goes, we don't know what to do. And you default to either fighting, which is still stressful because you're going through something you've never experienced before, and that's an added burden.
Mm-hmm.
Or you go into flight mode and you just freak out all over the place because of the exact same reason. You have no idea what to do.
I was going to ask Ed. Ed, uh, you're also part of a how would you call this of a company that was affected during the lockdowns. Did you ever experience any type of stress or anxiety during those very critical those very critical moments of last year?
Um, yeah, actually, when Philip was sharing his experience, I can definitely identify with him in a lot of things. I'm part of the human capital management
Mhm.
department of the company. So when uh, when the pandemic hit, lockdown started, um, we were just very grateful that we were all the company was capable of working from home. But I can imagine, so it was more bearable, I guess, when it came to if when we talk about stress. What was stressful was really just trying to navigate through the pandemic, come up with policies that will help. the organization survive and go through the pandemic, there were a lot of uncertainties, a lot of unknown variables that we were still trying to figure out. It was very stressful. At the start of the pandemic, it was very, very stressful. And I think all companies can, I think it's not just in one company, but everybody, just because of the nature of the pandemic, but everybody was not sure and certain about what will happen. And like everybody, like what Phil and Tip has been sharing, it's a very stressful thing. It's a very stressful experience. So um, personally, I went through a lot of stress as well. uh, I can feel it in, it would manifest physically. It would also affect my mental, emotional as well. Uh, but from what I understand, um, anxiety happens when there is chronic stress, right? And I think like what Philip was sharing, what Phil was sharing earlier. There's two types, generally two types of stress. You mentioned the eustress, and then I think the negative stress is. Correct me if I'm wrong, Phil. De-stress, is that
Yeah.
correct?
No, no. It's it's stress. It's entirely a negative thing to care about. But
Okay, so
I think it's not the stress.
de-stress.
The stress
Okay,
is like
so but
removed.
there's negative stress and there's
Yeah.
positive stress. So I
Yes.
think
Yeah.
what
That's
what
right.
what what helped me through the last year, the first part of the pandemic, was just turning all of the stressors into something positive. It's really more of my mindset and my attitude towards the stressors. So there were so many stressors, right? And I think if I didn't handle it well, um, it definitely would have turned into anxiety.
Mm.
And for some, it goes further extreme to depression. Um, but I tried my best to look at the challenges, to look at the stress in a positive light, and I think that really helped me. But to the question, did I go through stress? Oh, definitely. Every day was very stressful. Um, it was tough and heavy, not just mentally, but also emotionally and physically as well.
I have a follow up question for Coach Phil. Uh, can you manage stress enough to where it doesn't lead to anxiety? But before you answer the question, we're gonna pause for a break.
Mhm.
Hello to everyone from Roof Chamber Radio. I'm encouraging all of you to stay here, stay in this chamber. If you want to be inspired, you want to be encouraged, this is where it's at. And we're all going to need this, especially, in this new year that we're in. We don't know what's up for tomorrow. We don't know what's going to happen next week or next month. But I believe that when you gather with people who believe in the power, the faithfulness, and the goodness of the Lord Jesus Christ, there is power in that in itself. So stay here. Stay in the roof chamber radio. Be inspired, be encouraged. And let's all go through life, not on our own, and more than just with each other, but let's speak the faith, let's share the faith, let's live by faith, and let's walk by faith. God bless you all, everyone from Roof Chamber Radio.
I think what Gary Vee mentioned on that video, we don't know what's gonna happen tomorrow, next
Mhm.
month. That's pretty much consistent with what we're talking about right now with
Yeah.
regards
Oh
to
yeah.
anxiety and stress. But my question for Coach Phil is, uh, can we manage stress enough to where it doesn't lead to anxiety?
Oh, yes, it is possible. My example earlier is one of the best proof that I could give you. Like a fireman,
Mm.
he's gonna go inside a burning house. That's a very stressful thing. It's absolutely many thoughts would come into your mind if you're the fireman. You would be thinking of, I might get burned. The house might crumble on me. I might not be able to get out. I might suffocate and all that stuff. But still, you do it. So there's that kind of courage that tells you you may not be certain about the outcome, but you're gonna do it anyway. And so one of the ways that you can actually manage stress is that if this is backed on by a certain source of courage, well, a fireman will not readily just do that because without training, without equipment, without proper protection, he will not be doing that. I don't think anyone would like to be doing
Mm.
that. But there are still some with great courage, like a father, no matter how helpless he has or no matter unequipped he would. If his daughter or his son is inside a burning house, he would go and do it. Something pushes you to go through that stress to accomplish something. And basically, for people who are working, you've got big projects. You want to accomplish something, and it's fulfilling for you when you get it done. And so you still continue doing it, even if you're losing a lot of energy, a lot of time. Yeah, it's quite a sacrifice. Now, of course, you don't do these challenging things when you're tired. Even a fireman will need to rest. And here in the Philippines, there are calamities. There are very many times calamities come over this country. Those people who help, they also have a threshold for fatigue. They get tired too, and when that hits them, they can't do the job anymore. It's gonna cause anxiety. So what we do is somebody has to replace the tired worker, or there are only certain amounts or certain periods where you're going to do this job so that it does not cause or does not get to anxiety. Because people, all when prolonged stress occurs, and that's what you got to prevent, it will reach to a certain point of helplessness and anxiety there. So managing anxiety is basically one, you got to be strong. You need to muster some courage. Yes, passion is a very important thing that drives you into doing something very difficult. But passion is not the only energy that you have. Now, here during the pandemic, nobody has the passion to have a pandemic. Nobody's passionate about getting through a pandemic. No one ever planned that out. That's why it's causing stress, the uncertainty, the ambiguity, the loss of judge. You're not sure where it's going to end up with. From where do you find your courage? And more often, in a normal setting, we find courage from the outcome. Like when we have an expected outcome, oh yeah, I'm gonna go through this kind of investment because the outcome is gonna have some return. It's gonna sacrifice a lot from me, but it will have bigger returns when it comes. Yeah, that's one thing. So you're not anxious about your money. But when your money suddenly disappears for no reason, oh, it's causing you anxiety, probably because you are leaning on the things that you have for your money. That's that kind of thing. Another example, when the pandemic hit, you lose your job and you're relying mainly on your sources rely mainly on the income that you make, and that when it becomes unsettled or uncertain, it really causes anxiety. But to prevent that is only if you have a strong rebound from other sources, then you'll be able to overcome it. And a track record that you will probably find is that when the pandemic hit 1 year ago, March 16, we were on lockdown. People were saying we're not gonna live until by May we're all dead like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's been a year, and this should be a track record of your resiliency. It's a track record of what you've done. So the next pandemic, oh wow, who cares? Something like that. You kind of develop some courage. So those things help you manage anxiety, courage, and for children and for most common people, courage happens when you try to engage on some projects or some tasks that you otherwise would avoid, or things that are so challenging or difficult. Like studying math would be a difficult thing for me, but you got to do it. And then when you
No choice.
no, yeah, and it's also good sometimes that children are forced into studying and that, and then it builds them a credibility for their own personal, for their own sake. That one day when they graduate, they say, "Oh, I was able to do something that I thought I was never able to accomplish. I never thought I'd do that." And then you become more courageous. You get more confidence. Standing up in front of a crowd on stage, those things that manages anxiety, because when you are able to speak, it means you can manage how to negotiate with people, or
Mm.
maybe even talk to your boss, ask for a raise. Maybe deal with a new scheme or program during the pandemic, and we do something like a shifting of schedule, or maybe a work from home scheme that we can come up with instead of just sitting in the corner out of fear, not being able to speak. There. So anxiety can really be managed. Many daily examples give us a chance to remove ourselves from anxiety. And I like what Yara Valenciano said. Yeah, faith is one of the best ways of you encountering the difficulties and the uncertainties of life. I remember, surely you are reminded of when you were young and you were afraid of the dark. You never wanted to wake up in the evening, even if you felt like going to the restroom or going to the bathroom, but you're just so afraid of the dark, you didn't want to get up, so you would pee on your bed. Like
Ah, ah, ah.
yeah, things like that. But as you grow, you learn and you experience that there's nothing really in the dark. There's no boogeyman or no monster or creature right there. It's just a myth. It's just a nanny story. And then you realize, yeah, and you start getting normal with going into the dark. Yeah, there.
Wow.
Doc, yeah,
Go ahead, Bond. Sorry.
yeah, Doc Phil, because we were talking about stress leading into anxiety, then this feeling of helplessness that actually triggers the next part of our discussion, which is depression.
Hmm.
So, the feeling of helplessness actually is very conducive for that. Would you agree?
That's true. Helplessness and depression. Depression is quite a difficult thing because it has some associated acceptance. It accepts the situation, unchangeable. The situation is unbearable, but you just have to endure that and you have to be right there. You don't like it, and it's not worth making you worthless, making you uh, think conclusively about this situation is nothing more than nothing meaningful, nothing worth doing here. That's depression. Anxiety would be like, I can do something, but my hands are tied.
Hmm.
I'm being suppressed from doing what I need to do. Or I don't know what to do about the future. That's coming. That's anxiety. Depression is, yeah, life is bad. That's how it is.
Okay.
Like a feeling of hopelessness.
Yes, the hopelessness, yeah, comes in.
Well,
That's
I'm feeling that way about right now about DOH.
Hold it,
um,
hold it.
I know what you mean.
Keep it together. Keep it together, Pons. Keep it together.
Mari's not here, and
That's why I'm saying it for him.
anyway, I'd like to ask Philip. Philip, did you go through depression during the pandemic? I mean, the lockdowns, first few months at least.
No. My episode with depression happened even before the pandemic. This was, I think, four, wait, yeah, six, not 4 years, 6 years ago. But uh, to jump off from Coach Phil's perspective, depression is an acceptance of the situation. However, it goes to the extreme of not wanting to do anything about the situation for it to improve or to do anything at all. It is basically an internal, emotional, and intellectual decision to just not function, to not do anything. Whereas, I'll also elaborate on what Coach Phil said. Whereas anxiety is the complete extreme that you want to do a lot of things, but you don't know what to choose. In depression, it's basically, yes, I know I can't do anything, and I'll just stop trying. That didn't happen to me during the pandemic because at that point I had enough coaching and help from my psychiatrist and medication to go through it. But back when I was much younger and I was affected by experiences that were very much connected to a young man, like not being liked by your crush and your career just not being where you expected it to be. At that point, I think I just gave up, and I accepted the fact that okay, I'm a failure in love life. I'm a failure in career, which was not true, but that's how I was thinking because I didn't know what else to do with regard to that. And so I just my mind just thought that those negative thoughts, and I really just shut down. I mean, I woke up, I stayed in bed, I would only go down to eat. My family noticed the huge change from this energetic, bubbly, talkative son, brother, and friend to others. I cut myself off from every one of my friends. I just gave up. And it was so bad. My family didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. I just didn't want to live anymore.
Mm.
And one of the ways that I highly recommend, and the way that I was able to overcome my depression, was when I finally took this one tiny step, and that changed everything. It was small. It was a small task that changed my perspective. I talked to someone about it.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
told them what I was going through, and this person, because of my action, was able to help me do something about it. This was just basically, okay, I know you're in a bad situation, but you've got to do something about it, even if it's just hanging out with us, uh, like like you need to, once a week, because that we could hang out once a week. And so slowly, I was able to get my bearings again, and it took a while, but as I went through that experience, I realized, in terms of love life and career at the same time,
Mhm.
that one, every person has their time, whether it's in the early 20s, the mid 20s, or the late 20s. Everyone has their time. Yours is just not when you expected it to happen, and that's not your fault. That's not anyone's fault. You just have to accept that truth and just move forward with your life and continue looking, continue living. Because if I don't, if I decide to commit suicide, it ends there. I am not going to be able to find that or reach that goal that I had for myself. And true enough, as I went through the years before the pandemic, I did experience those truths. And this is something that my therapist always did tell me before. All suffering has an end. Like, I know that. You know that. But you're not living that truth out because you're still living as if you hate the suffering. Well, guess what, Philip? Suffering is part of life. You're going to have to deal with it or it will deal with you.
Yeah.
And it was one of those moments in her clinic where I go, okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
This is why depression is a mental health issue because that feeling comes from the brain. I'll repeat what I mentioned earlier before the break. Our emotions, surprise, they don't come from here. Our emotions actually are processed here and they just trickle down to every other part of the body, which is probably why when Paul wrote this in his his letter to the Romans, he said, "Be transformed by the renewing of your mind."
Amen.
But back then, the context of the Greek was heart and mind were combined as the seat of human emotion. But see, that's the thing also. The mind is the seat of the emotions, meaning what you feel comes from here. And when you reframe what you think, when you reframe your perspective, which is why when Ed was saying earlier, I just changed my perspective about it. I typed in our private chat, yes, that's true. Perspective plays a huge role because yes, if you're struggling with depression, I will encourage you. Yes, your situation sucks, and yes, you've gone through really horrible situations before, but there's a reason why they were horrible situations before and not our relationships until now. It's because they end. Sooner or later they end. And for me, going through the pandemic actually affirmed what my psychiatrist taught me because up until then, I no, sorry, not up until, yes, up until then, I really was struggling with two major areas in my life. One was career, because have had a lot of jobs and I couldn't figure out where I wanted to be or what I wanted to do. And of course, number two, I've never had a girlfriend. And at that point, I didn't have a girlfriend. And I thought, I'm not getting any younger. Uh, I want to have kids. I want to be a father. Yeah, I just envisioned that for myself, and it wasn't happening. And I was like, I'm 28. Oh my gosh, I'm getting old. But surprise of all surprises, right? The week before, the week before the pandemic started, that's when that's when my girlfriend and I became official. And then that was when I got regularized at my job. And can you imagine? It was a pandemic. But my biggest concern was I was praying to God and I said, please, please give me job security first before you give me a girlfriend. And my logic was obviously you need to be secure first before you take care of somebody. It doesn't make sense for you to take care of somebody and you don't have the cash or the capabilities to do so. So that was my prayer to God. But apparently, God's test for me and my anxiety was, nah, I'm gonna give you the girl first. And 2 days later, the weekend after, the Monday after that weekend, she said yes to be my girlfriend. My boss calls me to her office and she says, "Oh yeah, I'm regularizing you." And I was like, at that moment, what my psychiatrist told me years before, yeah, everyone has their own time. Suffering has an end. It ended at that moment. And imagine that was 4 years of me coming to terms with that perspective, with that mindset. And it was tough because when you don't see any results, it does get sad. It does get discouraging. And it does get depressing. But going through all of that really, really just encouraged me as I faced the pandemic because I had literally just experienced the breakthrough. And so even when the pandemic hit, I go, okay, this sucks, but what can I think about that's positive? Which is what my psychiatrist is talking. One, you still have work. Two, you still can work because I know people who still have work, but because of the pandemic, their companies just said, yeah, we're gonna have to shut down for a month. We're not letting you go. We just can't operate and we can't give you salary because of what's happening. And the third was you know that bad times have an end, and you just went through a personal you just went through a personal low that became a high because you duked it out. And so I applied that at the pandemic. So you apply what you. I told myself apply what you've learned. This sucks, but this will have an end eventually. And true enough, the ECQ was lifted. Yes, there are talks about, right now, the ECQ being reinstated because cases are rising. But if we look back exactly 1 year from today, we know that eventually it will die down. Hopefully, the cases don't increase anymore, and there will be an end to this. We just have to, in a way, as Ed said, we really have to reframe how we think about these things because if we don't, we might get stuck in a place of depression where we just passively accept everything and not do something about it, which we can, or move towards the other extreme where we're thinking about doing a lot of things, but not really figuring out what the best course of action is. And from my perspective, I want to share this as an encouragement to all of our viewers tonight and today. The best course of action for you is to reframe your mindset. Remember, a year ago we thought this would be the end of the world. Surprise, it isn't. And even if things get much better or much worse, know that it still can change sooner or later, but that's the most important part. It can and it will change. We just have to realize that truth.
Well, I'd like to bring in a different perspective, Philip. Um, you know, it was previous to the pandemic, but that's when the everything was yanked out from under my feet. No job. I had to support my wife and child. No work, and there was no pandemic and no money, and I was up way over my head in debt. And surprisingly, and also I suffered a mild heart attack in 2016. So everything that could go wrong did go wrong. But in the middle of the pandemic, or rather right before the pandemic started, that's when I started experiencing God's surprises. And half of my debt is gone. And we're actually looking forward to some other things happening that could address the rest of that debt. Mind you, we're still going through different crises right now. My wife's going to undergo a very expensive cataract operation next week. But we're going through this, you know, with the knowledge that we've seen God move in the past.
Yeah.
And we know that He's going to be there. So that really changes your perspective. You're more confident as a result. So that's that's a way different thing. Because when you do go through that, oh boy, everything that you thought you believed that
Yeah.
is really going to be so challenged.
He will never leave you nor forsake you.
Yep, exactly.
Hebrews 2. Um, Coach
Phil,
Phil,
yeah,
go ahead.
yeah. Am I right in thinking that way?
Well, I really appreciate what you did. You have that confidence in believing in God. You know
Because
what?
I saw him.
Yeah,
Because I saw him.
it's
That's
it's
there's no
very
two
yeah.
ways about that. Yeah.
You know, we recommend people that when they don't know what to do, you gotta look up to someone whom you believe can be your role model or someone you can trust. Like for example, you got you there's something in your body that's not functioning well and you need an operation. Now you cannot operate on yourself, of course. So you look for a surgeon, someone who's competent. You make sure you interview this guy. You want to make sure he's the right guy who's going to do it. And he's got the capability. He's not going to put you down. You're not going to die in the surgical bed there. That kind of thing. You investigate everything and then you start developing trust. And then you go through the process and then you come out alive. You come out recovered. In much the same way, we do need someone like that in surgery, doing surgery in our emotional, personal, and most everything that we have in our life. And you look forward to someone who can do it, who can guide you through it. And in companies, it's called a mentor, who will be someone you will trust, who can tell you what to do, who gives you an instruction. You can believe it, you can rely on it, that kind of thing. It's a very good thing that you did there, Sir Pons.
Um, Coach Phil, real quick question: how important is it for family to support an individual who suffers from depression? And
Oh,
second
yeah.
question, a follow-up question for that is: how important is it for a person suffering from depression to talk, to be able to talk to someone, to be able to have somebody to how do you call this, to rely on in terms of advice, in terms of, apart
Mhm.
from your therapist, of course, in terms of just really venting out and just sort of like a catharsis
Yes.
type
Yes.
of
Yes.
thing. Yeah.
Mhm.
Like for example, in my case here in the United States, the leader of our men's group, which we call the Men of Valor, we meet every 2 Thursdays in a month. His name is Cody. Um, he's the type of person I would call whenever I go through some issues that, because like men are very, it's just very hard sometimes for us to talk about our issues, right? But Cody is the one person I can talk to anytime, and he makes himself available. He does
Mhm.
the same for me, by the way. Whenever he goes through his own type of issues, he talks to me. So, how important is that, and how important is the support of your family when you go through depression?
Yes, indeed, it is very important. It should be your rule of thumb. If ever you find yourself isolated, you've got to reconnect with people who are significant to you. That is the one, it is one of the best ways. It's actually the best way you can recover from your depression. When people are depressed, their tendency is lock the door, stay enclosed in their room, and they don't talk to anybody. But when you start reconnecting, even to people who have been difficult for you to deal with, but they're part of your family, part of your story, part of your
Mm,
past,
mm,
reconnecting with them removes you from that depression. There are these people who had divorce, and the one thing that got them back on track again is when they tried to connect again, made a phone call with that person they got divorced to, and when they feel like, oh, everything is doing fine, oh, that's a sense of there's a sense of security there. That at this part of my life, there was a significant part of me that became a blessing or an encouragement for this person. So connecting really is the first discipline when you're feeling depressed. The very thing about psychotherapy is that when you connect with your therapist, you talk. As you talk, you prioritize in your mind what is the first thing you're going to say. There. Well, you don't know exactly if it's really disorganized, it's so overwhelming. The first thing you say is about what I feel. I feel overwhelmed. I feel like I'm so confused what I'm going to do. What's the first thing I'm going to be doing? And I don't know what to do with my life. But at least I can start with that. That's the first thing, is that I am in distress. I am not in a very comfortable position. And somebody has to know it. Somebody else has to know it. You don't talk to yourself. It's so difficult to talk to yourself when you already know what you're going to talk about, right? What other thing, what new thing can you tell yourself when you already know? And there's no reason to listen to yourself anymore. But when you feel like when you talk to someone else, that's the time you felt listened to.
mm,
That's the time, the first time you felt like somebody understood you, not just you. And you're not alone in being understood. Someone else was there that understood you. So that's the rule of thumb. When you're feeling depressed, connect. You have to reconnect with people around you. That's the first thing. It starts there. And then
Yep.
you
Very
people
valuable.
to start talking about yourself. Some people don't talk about themselves when they're depressed. They keep it in secret. And suicide is like that. It's a secret thing. Someone commits suicide in secret. He never does it in public. Although some try to do that in public, it turns out as it becomes an attention that they
Yes,
want to
I
gather. Yeah, but someone does it in a suicidal person will do it in secret. So that's why it's a lot more dangerous when somebody expresses a ideation of suicide. Basically, when you are not talking, if somebody that you know is depressed and is not talking, be available, but make sure everything, all the situations is safe. For example, let them stay in the room, but don't lock the door. Keep it open. You're gonna be semi-private most of the time. If you go to the bathroom, just make sure that you can knock. Oh, hey, are you still okay there? It's been 1 minute. It's been 12 minutes already, like that. You know, things like that, and you make sure that that's the World Health Organization will call that as the psychosocial support that you can give for these people. We're not experts, but we can do that. It's this first aid. It's the psychological first aid that we can do to them allow them, when they're ready to talk, allow them to be able to talk. So give them a situation that makes them comfortable enough to freely speak. And we don't really force them to talk, you know. But when you put a situation where they can freely speak, and that happens when somebody's available to listen. Yeah. Someone who's sitting in a chair and he can see people around, and there are people who's standing by waiting, waiting for him. Yeah. Chances are he will talk to you, or he or she will talk to you. But when a person is isolated, no one to talk to, that is a very difficult thing. Don't do that. Don't let that happen to you when you're depressed, okay? There.
Yeah, it's a very difficult situation indeed. Just the feeling
Yeah.
of being alone,
Mm-hmm.
feeling of just isolation. Although you know you're surrounded with people, it's just
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's just very difficult to say what you feel inside.
Yeah.
I say this as a person who went through that, and I'm sure Philip can relate with this. Philip, I have a question
Yeah.
for you. Did your ADHD, because the two of us, we've talked about this, we both have that same condition. Did your
Mhm.
ADHD escalate during the pandemic? Did that kick in, or what's going on with that?
The ADHD, well, because I was already medicated for that, that didn't affect me in the slightest. But it was the change of the the environment, the whole culture of the world, from living normally to living in the new normal. That's what triggered the adjustment anxiety because I didn't know what to do, like many people who went through it. And so that's why I was anxious because I didn't, like what Coach Phil said, I didn't know what was coming in the next hour, day, week, or month. So I was living in this constant anxiety, this um, w- doc, what's the or Coach Phil, what's the opposite word for out there? I was living in a state of chronic anxiety, and I was actually amazed because Netflix put out a documentary called The Virus Explained. And the writers and researchers of that show are really good because in the third episode, they had Idris Elba explain that the reason why a lot of people are experiencing prolonged anxiety is because, according to research, our bodies and our immune systems are used to stress, but they're used to short term stress. For
Mm-hmm.
example, like the example of Coach Phil, if you're a fireman and you need to rush into a building to save people, you're not gonna do that for 4 months straight. You're just gonna do that for the hour and the stress is done. But because of the pandemic, where we don't know what's going to happen, that prolongs the stress,
Yeah.
that weakens the immune system, and that's what keeps the anxiety going on and on and on and on. And so I wasn't able to adjust because I really had no context with which to adjust. And so for me, it was really the uncertainty of it all. It was the oh gosh, it wasn't the depression of I don't know what to do, I'll stop. It wasn't even I don't know what to do, I'll do everything. It's more of I don't know what to do, and I really don't know what to do, so I'm panicking internally, I'm freaking out internally, but I had no solution because I had no, like many others also who went through the pandemic, we had no prior experience to back up what we wanted to do.
True. True.
So I actually want to let Coach Phil continue this. For those who are struggling with that uncertainty, even up until now, what is the best course of action?
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's a pandemic, and there are so many things that have been sacrificed already. Listen, it's something that, like what you mentioned, Philip, it's not something that we all got prepared for. And so it's definitely uncertain. But what do you do when you're not sure about the future? Anyway, it's true that the future is never really sure. Nobody's really certain about the future. But this is where we get ourselves trained. One, we can take this as an opportunity to explore and be odd. You know, like when you're being a scientist, you try to be explorative of things. You try to open your thoughts to possibilities right there. But when you're stuck with the normal possibilities you have, you're going to be in conflict with what you are discovering. So here's what happened in the pandemic. Many people are used to having their jobs. They got a source of income that comes in regularly. And they get out of the house. They do their normal duties outside. And they never really had a lot of time to stay in the house. And like being in the house was something quite different for many people. And when you're not open to that change, it becomes a source of anxiety. When you're not open to not having any money in your wallet, you look at your wallet, it's laughing at you, it's laughing with you, and it's empty, and you will be very anxious about it. But then you're going to have to try to discover it's impossible not to get sustained. It's impossible not to survive, even when you don't have that money in hand. There has to be a way to continue life, to continue what I do. And I admire the people who are in missions. With the lack of money, they never stop their mission.
Amen.
The lack of money did not stop their goal and purpose. And so you go back to your purpose in life. You go back to the very existence you have right here. Why am I here? What's the basic thing that I'm going to be able to do for definitely tomorrow? I will still be alive. What would be better to do when I'm alive tomorrow? Right there. You don't think about a conclusion like tomorrow I'm dead. No, it's not likely. Everything here in our lives, the heartbeat, your lungs, your skin, all the biological systems you have are doing their work to keep you alive because tomorrow they believe you will still be alive. And so you go and think about this. When you're feeling anxious about the pandemic, tomorrow you will still be alive. And number two, tomorrow we will discover something new. Anyway, we've got many capabilities, and these are the mental faculties that we have. You know, if I can just suggest a few things in our capacity, we are able to make decisions. We can be intuitive. We can go with creativity. We can think about exploring things and learning the situation. That's one of the very important skills we've got so that we deal every day with problems. Now, be self aware about this also. We probably have we have probably been used to expecting success, and we call that life. When you have success, that's life. Life will be all about having success, and you probably have that all the time. But you can reframe, like Philip said. You can reframe. Life could be a mixture of success and failures, and that is still life. You progress, you still grow. Growth never stops. Healing never stops. Recovery never stops. Rest is always available. And doing something with the works of your hands or with whatever strength you have, you can take action on something. We're not like trees. Trees can do only one thing, which is grow. They never get to walk around or tell somebody what to do, or they never even get to congregate and come up with a leadership system or something like that. They never have a community that talks about what's the next process in our legislative procedure like that. Right? They never have that, but they just simply grow. We, however, being human, we have many kinds of uh, things that we can do. But another thing I've mentioned already too. First one, yeah, the when you're anxious, you go and refrain. Another one is that you go and remember that you can take action in something. Here's another thing. You will remember, you will get a record of the things that you have done before that tells you you've been able to accomplish something significant. When you're anxious, you go back to your track record. What has happened to me before that I have what problem, what big challenge have I been able to overcome? That's your track record. That tells you, yes, you can. You can do something. You can actually you are able to understand many things. You go back to your track record. And when your actions find number four, actually there are a lot more other things. When you don't know what to do, get an expert. Get someone who has been there, or if he has not been there, someone you look up to who can be strong for you, and then it makes you hold on. Now, this is for leaders. Leaders have a very, very difficult task. And I understand that some leaders cannot afford to be weak because a lot of people are looking up to them. And the only strength that these people have is his strength. He's trying to be stubbornly strong against the conditions, but deep inside is also being weakened. But the people are inspired by that leader. We look to leaders, we look to mentors, we look to people who seem to be unbreakable, and they become our inspiration. That's also one way. Now, for a leader, and he can sense that he's also breaking inside, he's got a leader higher than him always. And yes, we all need to look up to that. There's a higher leader above all in charge, unbreakable in many ways. And I'm talking about God, that you may not probably believe in God, but then when you try it, it makes you survive, makes you move on for some reason. And if it's not a healthy thing, go ahead and take it away from your life. But I tell you, if it causes you health and it causes you sustenance in your life, it makes you more resilient with life. Well, God has a big place in there. He's got a good position right there. And that care we're looking for. In the Philippines, when we help people recovering from addiction or any other kind of mental disorder, the spirituality is important. You know why? Because we consider people as not just people with chemical actions in their brain. You can medicate that. They're not just people who have habits where you can train them and then they can have routines. They're not just people who eat, drink, and get their systems healthy. People have soul. The soul is what tries to connect with meaning and with purpose. It's also the one that connects with relationships and all other people. And when you start dealing people or helping people develop the soul, you will understand that you are capable of inspiring people and you are also capable of being inspired. One proof of that is that when you listen to music, a music with lyrics that you really, really like, it upholds you, it lifts you up. That's an inspiration. That doesn't come from biology, it doesn't come from emotions on psychology or every analysis that psychology will give. You will remember it's something that inspires. It's got to do something with soul. It's not even something you understand, but it lifts you up. Yeah.
Mm. Amen. Amen.
Somebody holds your hand, embraces you. What does that mean? No chemical exchange there, nothing. But it comforts you. And comfort is something not mechanical. You know there's a soul there that's being recuperates through that comfort, to the caring there. That's why it's important that you also consider your soul when you're dealing with anxiety. My my discipline is that when I'm in a position when I'm so I feel hopeless at things, or when I'm so anxious, when I hate what's happening, response like when you hate what's happening, I recall my biology classes about how the baby is formed inside the womb, how the sperm meets the egg cell, and then it starts developing. In a week it becomes a fully functioning thing. I get fascinated by the fact that why does it work with purpose? That doesn't have a brain. This group of cells that doesn't really have a brain, it works with purpose, and its purpose is to give life. Why is that? And then it forms, it turns into a fetus, it turns into a baby. 9 months later, you get born, and you know that it's you. For some reason, something that is, you cannot understand how it happened, but they purposely managed to come up with certain designs, process, with certain limits. They will not overproduce hands. They will not overproduce brains. They got limits too, and they got orders for some purpose and for some reason. They get formed, and that reminds me, hey, the whole nature which I cannot explain provided me life. Is that simply just gonna be ruined by these things? The lack of money, the lack of job, the problems with the community, problems with the politics, problems with family, the broken heart, the relationship that's lost. Life keeps up for some grand thing. So I always tell myself, this is not yet the end. A grand thing is still about to come. And yes, indeed, there is a grand thing about life. It can't just stop here. Yeah, some things will not be limited by the lack of money. Some things will not be limited by the lack of connections. And you still have the chance to do it. Yeah. And there, it requires us to be humble and it keeps our lives simple. And then we learn, we survive, we get better. You turn to someone higher.
Fence,
Yeah.
we're gonna have these guys again.
Oh yeah, for sure, man. I'm like, so dumbfounded right now. But anyways, life has its mixed bag of things. It has its ebb and flows. But the one thing that's constant in our lives is Jesus Christ. God is the only constant in this world. And I remember what my pastor, Pastor Dave Anderson, said in his preaching last Sunday. He said, "Pages and stages will be added in our life, but that does not change eternity." You know, so we have to aim for eternity. We always need to aim for eternity. We may be hamstrung by, the pandemic and the lockdowns, but the Bible is very clear in Psalm 23, verse 4. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they protect me. So, friends, I'd like to invite you to receive Jesus as your personal Lord and Savior as we end the show. And I'd like to ask Coach Phil to lead us in prayer. Coach Phil, if you can pray for our audience. Those of you who are going through mental issues, you can shoot us an email at theroofchamberradio@gmail.com, and we can refer you to Coach Phil if you need to. All right. So, Coach Phil, can you please lead us in prayer?
Sure. Well, let's go and pray. Our Father, there have been so many challenges that came up to us right now, and we do understand that these things seems to be impossible to overcome. But your word does tell us that there's no challenge that you give us that we'll not be able to accomplish. In fact, in everything, in every kind of situation that is difficult, you provide a way out for it. And I do know, Lord, that you are a God who designed us in such ways that you have been very, very detailed in the way that you have created us, very intrinsic. You had many wonderful ways of creating us. I'm sure you've put a lot of time and effort, very precious resources to make that happen. Very intelligent and purposeful things. It gives us guarantee that you have a plan and we can't just simply thwart that or circumstances cannot just simply stop that. You are a God. You have great intelligence. You've got great control over things that we think about. In fact, the unthinkable things for us, you've already designed them, you've already created them. We are pretty much sure right now, we ask, give us great faith to believe you can still do the same thing in our lives right now, even for unthinkable things, for things uncertain, for things that we do not know what to do. Because definitely there is one God who knows the very end, as He knows the very beginning, as He knows the details of everything, even for those things we will never be able to understand completely. Lord, we pray that during this time of pandemic, and we're asking you that you bless the listeners, that they maintain their stillness, their courage, that they maintain their belief that there's a stronger power running, a stronger power that is in favor of good futures for us, a prosperous future, a thing that will bless us, not to harm us. And we know, O Lord, that you have in your mind great plans for us. May we be able to tune ourselves into that belief, because after all, it's the only thing that is a very reasonable thing to do during this pandemic. We pray, sustain us. We know it's temporary. Our brothers believe so, that it's not permanent thing. It will change. It will come to pass just like seasons. Sustain us through. And when the opportunity comes, this season passes, we will be there, grateful, blessing, and praising, giving again to many opportunities of goodness towards others. And you, O God, will be praised. In Jesus' name, amen. Oh, there. Benji, you're a little, you're on mute. Okay.
Oh, sorry. Philip, you mentioned something about your therapist earlier. Did you want to, like promote your therapist or something like that?
Oh yeah, sure, sure. Thank you. Let me just get my screen. Okay, okay. So I'm gonna share my screen.
Right. While you're sharing your screen, I'd like to ask Coach Phil. Phil, how do they get in touch with you?
Oh, well, you can connect me at my Facebook, Coach Philo,
Mm-hmm.
or you can also get to my website at Coach Philo right here. I don't know. Can I share my screen now?
Yes,
There you
yes,
go.
it's
There
there.
it is.
It's
It's
there.
there.
It's there on the screen.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's right.
Did you see
Yeah,
it
it's there at the
Did I
bottom.
share?
at the
Was I
bottom?
sharing it?
No, no,
Yeah.
I think Kelvin put that already together.
Khalil
Ah,
put it
Oh
together.
yeah, yeah.
Our
The
our
banner
our
below.
our,
there.
our
Yeah.
technical
There,
director.
yes, yes. You can connect with me at coachphilo.com. I also have my Facebook, and it's also Coach Philo from Facebook. That's the name.
There
You
you
can
go.
there.
All right. Okay. And Phil, Philip? Are you ready for the?
Oh yeah, sure. I click share screen. How do I?
I think
How does it come up though? Oh,
I
is it?
think Khalil. Oh, there you go.
Oh, there
Okay.
you go. Okay.
There's.
All right. So this is my psychiatrist. Her name is Dr. Pearl, and she also has a clinic online. It's called Soul and Mind, and she uses this app called Now Serving.
Mm,
It's an app you can download on the Apple Store, the Apple App Store, or on Google Play. Uh, Coach Phil, are you familiar with that app?
Google what?
No, Serious. Sorry, Now Serving by Serious MD. It's an app where you can do online consultation.
Oh, well, I'm not familiar with that. I'll try to discover it. It sounds interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, it is. So you can find her on that app, and you can actually find. Well, you can find her on Facebook, and then her team will direct you to the app because that's where she holds her sessions now. And it's amazing, really, how technology has allowed people to even just conduct therapy sessions on their mobile devices. So
Right.
for those who would want to open up to a well, for the ladies out there who want to open up to a female therapist, you can go to Dr. Pearl, and of course for us men who would prefer, of course, who would prefer a male therapist to help with their problems, I would recommend seeing Coach Phil.
Dr. Pearl Reyes, correct?
Yeah.
Pearl Reyes. All right. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining our show. I just like to remind everyone we have a Patreon account. The Patreon account is www.patreon.com/Roof Chamber Radio. If you feel like this show or the episodes of the show of the podcast that you've watched has ministered to you or blessed you, do support us and visit this Patreon account, and your support will go a long way. And we thank you so much for just watching the show consistently. And just want to remind everyone that whatever donations we'll be receiving through our Patreon account will go to the development of new shows and new channels very soon. All right. So do catch us next week, Friday. That's 9 p.m. in the Philippines because of the time change, and we switch from fall backward to spring forward. That's daylight savings time in the United States. So check us out. Roof Chamber, the Roof Chamber Radio Facebook page, and subscribe to us on the Roof Chamber Radio YouTube channel. You can also catch us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on Google Podcasts, and Radio Public. So that's 8 in the morning Eastern Time, 9 Central. Sorry, 9 in the morning Eastern Time, 8 in the morning Central Time, 7 in the morning Mountain Time, and 6 in the morning Pacific Time, 2 p.m. in the United Kingdom, and 9 p.m. in the Philippines. All right, friends, this has been the Roof Chamber Radio. Thank you so much, Coach Phil and Philip. Once again, this has been the Roof Chamber Live. Jesus will always be just a prayer away.
Yes.